Welcome to the first episode. I cannot believe we're here. If you know this and you know me, you know that it has been a long road, but we have made it. First episode. Welcome to the Very Meli Podcast. This is our first episode, and I am excited to welcome you on this journey. Now, things that you should know before we start. First and foremost, I was very sad that I don't have like a full setup in my background for those of you watching the video. But then I'm like, but we got Mel. And Mel got color. I don't think we need a full background because she is the foreground, because she is the queen. Okay, anyways. So I thought I should just let you know if you're on video. I do have my lovely baby right here. She is thriving. You only see a little bit of her. Actually, hold on. We're just going to do this imperfect because it's episode 1. She's thriving. She looks way smaller on your video than she does in real life. I think she deserves a name. I am going to let you guys name my baby. And if you can't see it, if you're just listening to me on audio, I am talking about, what's the name of it? I forgot the name of this plant in English. In Spanish, it's called lengua de suegra. And it's a air purifying plant, which I love. And she's thriving. But she needs a name. So we are going to let you name her. I'm going to let you name her. She has not said what happened. The second thing I should tell you is that I have been trying to get to this place of recording like you would not believe. And today specifically, it is Sunday, May 25th. And I have been working on recording since 1 p.m. and we are here. Part of the reason is because I have decided to take this on as if it was a date. This is the most important date. So you are looking, if you are watching, at a girl who has done hair masks, who has done face masks, who has done her makeup. She's got nails specifically for the podcast. Like, we're talking about, like, I'm invested in this, okay? Just so you know, I'm invested in looking my best for you. Because if you know me, you know I would have come here without makeup and all that stuff. But I wanted to come on the first episode and talk to you about what this show is about, what this podcast is about. This is going to be coupled with a YouTube channel. And so I want to tell you all the things. But I think in order to start to tell you about what this is about, and mainly, just so you know, let me tell you a story about how the name came about. Specifically, Val, who is the only person who has visited me in Colombia so far, I will let you know, because I know it will be mostly friends watching this first episode. She was here in Colombia when we were talking about how I wanted to get back into podcasting and how I wanted to make it kind of like be an echo of hope and of identity and share with people the journey that I'm on, but also kind of work with them as far as like where they are in the journey of identity and hope and being themselves. And she's the one that suggested it should be called the Very Meli Podcast, because she's like, you know, the things you say are very Meli. This doesn't come out of like a lot of people. And so I love the name. It is very much a motto for me right now, because it is true. There are things that if you know me, that's very Meli. That's very like Meli to do that. And so why not? You know, however, I have to say that with that also came a lot of overthinking. Welcome to my world. And I'm grateful because I recently finally identified what the overthinking was. And in general, it is a way for us to feel protected. It is your brain being like, have you identified and looked at all the possibilities? Have you checked out all the different dangers that can come about, right? Our brain is meant to protect us, keep us safe, keep us alive. And on the other end, so identifying that that was mainly shame was important. But on the other end, the fact that I have experience in media, that I come from journalism, that I've done communications for so long, kind of played a part in this, because it was like, what's the best way to make this like an actual, real, successful, serious thing? Threw both of those on the board and just said, I'm just going to go with this. So welcome, because this is kind of an experiment for me. I'm building in public and we're doing this together. But I think the main thing that I want you to have in mind and to gain from joining me on this journey is that as I give myself permission to be myself, that you do the same for you, because the reality is that, and I admire those who do, but many of us don't feel like we have permission to be ourselves. We have it. Just bottom line, if you just want to end it now and just not listen to any more episodes, like, you have permission to be yourself, your full self. But they're going to say, oh, but this, like, you have permission. How that comes across to other people, that's on them. And a lot of times, like, we need to realize that people's responses to who we are, it comes from who they are or who they believe to be. It most of the times has nothing to do with you. That's been a hard lesson for me to learn. But alas, we are here, right? The other thing is that I want you to be inspired by the people that I know, the people that I come across, people who have learned and gained that permission, who are living fully being themselves, who are going after their dreams. And I think that's the second part of my identity that's really important. It's not just being bold and being out there and being full of myself, but I am a dreamer and I admire dreamers who are going for it. Because if I were to be derogatory against my history and my story, I would say that there's been a lot of times where I haven't gone for it. If you look at my resume alone, you would see that I have. But it's so easy to define ourselves by our failures and not our wins, right? And it often feels like we fail way more often than we win. But the reality is that our failures have taken us to our wins. Without them, without one, we don't have the other. So that is my hope. My hope is that you also gain this boldness and audacity and confidence over your dreams and the fact that they're worth fighting for. That's the thing. We all dream, but many of us don't feel like they're worth fighting for. Like, we got to do the logical thing. We got to do the reasonable thing, the adult thing. And I feel like this is a person I'm going to quote many times in my history, in my story, and in our time together. But I had a friend of mine tell me about a month or two ago. And I kind of laughed because I don't have a lot of friends speaking to me this way, but I kind of love it because I am this kind of person. He goes, you know that Jesus spits in the face of logic? And I was like, it's written. It is like, it wasn't even a voice note. It wasn't a call. It was a text. It is written. I can go back to that text time and time again. But it was the thing I needed to hear because so many times, and it can feel controversial when you hear it, but the reality is that so many times the logical thing will go against the faith filled thing. And we every day have a choice to decide what kind of life we're going to live. And I want to live a life of faith. And that's the thing I want you to walk away with is to have faith in yourself, to have faith in your dreams, and to have faith that God placed them in your heart for a reason and they're worth fighting for and they're worth living out. So that is a story behind the name and behind the podcast. But I also want to share with you the hold up, because the reality is if you know me, this idea specifically for this podcast came about September of last year. And we're at the end of May. So it's been many months. And for some people it'd be like, well, that's kind of reasonable when you're building something. Some might be like, Mal, you've really been holding up. Now, if you know me and you've been on the journey with me for a while, you would know that a few years ago, I launched another podcast called Find Your Start. And that Find Your Start actually has 4 episodes. It still exists online. You can still go and hear it. Unfortunately, I am so sad because the best episode of them all, actually, the audio sucks. And I didn't realize it until recently when I was going back and watching them. I don't know why the audio sucks because if I remember correctly, it didn't when I uploaded it. But anyways, it does now. But then Find Your Start felt like it was limiting. And the story behind that is, if you don't know much about me, you should know that I have ADHD and I'm autistic. So the idea behind Find Your Start was to help people find their start, because the reality is that motivational content and all those tips and tricks about productivity and following your dreams and how to do life well, quote unquote, doesn't apply to us. It really doesn't help us. Not that we couldn't do it. We just can't do it the way most people can. We can't look at productivity hacks and just go after them, because the way burnout happens for us and things like that, if you can hear what is happening on my window, you'd be appalled. Anyways, that's a little side note. Welcome to My Life with ADHD. Most advice doesn't work for us. And there is a lot of people who are neurodivergent that are suffering right now because they're following through that advice. And learning to live your life to the fullest and be fully yourself means understanding what works for you and what doesn't. And so that was the idea behind Find Your Start, is helping people find a way to start living their dreams. But it felt limiting. And so then I started with, well, let's call it the Meli Vargas Show. And I was going back and forth between show and podcast, and that kind of didn't happen. In between, I had a move in my life. Like, I literally moved. And so that's been crazy. We have a whole episode to talk about that, so I won't get much into it today. Before that, I had tried a podcast that was Momentos with Mel. These names are kind of catchy. I like them all. That was kind of the problem. Momentos with Mel, I recorded 2 episodes and never went live. And so I think part of the limitation for me this time around was kind of going through the shame of that. It's like, man, you're starting yet another podcast and you haven't worked on, like, none of them have worked. Now, mind you, there's statistics that say that most podcasts don't reach past, I think it's 8 or 10 episodes. And if you reach 25 episodes, you've actually reached, I think it's like top 10, top 5% of podcasters. So there's a lot of podcasts that don't make it past 10 episodes and even less past 25. Still then, the inner voice was like, girl, like, why are you going to launch another one? People are going to be like so annoyed with you because you're just doing this again. Is that a lie? Probably, but that's how I felt. And that was very limiting. And that kept me kind of going back and forth between whether I should do this idea or not. And the other thing I would say probably is like a second or third thing is I wanted this to be way more built before I started than it is. I wanted to have way more, I want to say, my toolbox before I started, but I had another very wise friend who was like, build in public. You know, people are so afraid to build in public. And the reality is that when you look at it, when you look at some great content creators who have evolved, I'm talking about Elise Myers being, for me, one of them. I love her. I'm a little obsessed with her, maybe more than I should. I'm not ashamed to say it. I don't care. You know, when it came to fame, quote unquote, was very organic. When I look at the people that I really admire, they're very organic. They've kind of grown from one platform to the other. Many of them were not expecting to grow a platform when they started. They just wanted a place to share. And so if I look at who I admire, their examples are, they have built in public. They don't have the perfect everything when they start. They don't have everything settled. They don't have the full vision, which is interesting because I do. And one of the things that I realized for dreamers is that there's a real struggle between where we are in reality and where our mind is, because we are able to dream so well, right? And we have such vivid dreams, and we can see the vision so clearly, and the tension between the vision and the reality is often what keeps us either in motion or stuck. And if I'm honest, I've been stuck because of where I see the vision going. I'm not necessarily in the place to make it happen. And so walking towards that has always felt a little bit overwhelming. So that's kind of what has been the hold up with all of this, and what has kept me honestly in overthinking and in overdrive. And there's been a lot of journaling. There's been a lot of conversation. There's been a lot of talking about the same thing several times. But I think that the reason why I share this is because this is the messy start, right? We talk about just starting, right? Nike says just do it. But the reality is that especially for neurodivergence, that feels very overwhelming. Just do it isn't exciting for us, and it's not motivating for us, because our mind is looking at all the different things that can happen and all the different ways how we're not ready and all the different possibilities. Like there's a conversation online about what ADHD should be called, and the reality is that we don't lack attention. There is no deficit in attention. Actually, there is an overwhelming presence of attention. We are too attentive and too in tune of all the different possibilities and all the different things and all the, like, it is possibility galore. It is steps galore. Like starting a podcast for me, like my brain already is like, okay, we got 1,000 steps we need to do. And the way you're seeing it, you see it this way, and you see events, and you see the YouTube channel, and you see, you know, books and this and that. Okay, we have 3,000 steps we need to do in order to get there. And my brain is like, and we got to get there, and we got to get there now. So you got to act now on 50 different things. And I think that that's what people get wrong about ADHD and neurodivergence, because we see all the steps and then our brain goes, oh, but I wasn't made to be able to categorize those in order. So I can't tell you what's first, because I see 10 or 15 different first. Like if you were to look at my Notion right now, you would see, a whole bunch of things that are like, I started with like high, normal, and low priority for my tasks. And now we have urgent. What is it? It's urgent, high, medium, normal, low. Like I had to like add different steps so that I could fully understand, because otherwise I had 30 high priority tasks to do today alone. And that's impossible. But that's kind of how it works. So for me, starting this podcast has felt overwhelming, and like the task list just goes on and on and on. But I knew that I needed to start somewhere. I went back and forth on the name. That is just rude. I hope you can't hear. On the name alone, I went back and forth. On What should the podcast be about? On that, I went alone. And there were days and weeks and months. And so I'm not saying this to complain. I am saying this because it is part of the journey. It is part of why we're here. It is part of why it's taking so long, but it's also part of why it's worth it, because I give myself permission to be messy, and more than messy, like imperfect here. We're not trying to be messy. But imperfect here. My hope is that somebody else gains that permission slip and says, you know what, I can start imperfectly. I don't have to have it all together. It doesn't have to be perfection. Version 1 is a valid version because there's 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 10, right? That's, thank God for the story. I remember hearing the story, and I don't know how much common knowledge it is for everybody, but it's true. You know, the iPad was built first. I don't know if many people know that. The iPad was built first, and in a meeting, Steve Jobs just decided to shelve it and then start on the iPhone. But the actual piece of technology that was first created was not the iPhone. That was not the first thought. So the first thought was the iPad, and that evolved, and that was completely developed. And yet somehow in a meeting, it was like, wait, but what if it could make calls? And it's like, wait, we need to make a smaller version of this. And they just shelved the iPad and started with the iPhone and launched that first. And then the iPad came about. And I think that that was the right move. But had they waited for a perfect piece of technology, they would have never even started on the iPad because it was not perfect. It was a solution to a problem. It brought about new technology, but it wasn't perfect. And if it was perfect, they wouldn't be releasing new versions every year. But I think that that's the beauty of building in public, is that, and mind you, if we follow through with the Apple advice or the Apple example, they're notorious for being quote unquote behind in technology, right? And for the Android fans, you're right. Samsung, and being one of the, I guess, bigger brands in that world, has launched a lot of imperfect cell phones, unsafe cell phones, or technology, or whatever it is, or smartphones, or, you know, tablets, or whatever it is. They've been imperfect. I mean, I still remember the woman whose leg got burnt because the thing exploded. I think it was a Note 1 or something. But people still bought it, and people still had it in their bags, and more than one. That battery was not supposed to exist. I'm just saying. But it's an example of people doing it imperfectly. So I think it's worth it. But so many people want to come right away and tell you, yeah, this is how you overcome overthinking. This is how you, right? Like, you do this or you do that, or you start a podcast. And everybody wants to tell you, but nobody really wants to tell you about the times where they're overthinking, when they're insecure, when they don't want to press record. They say, just press record and just go for it. But like, can we talk about what happens in our mind and in our brain, and what's brought us here, and what could delay things, and why we really don't like showing? If there is something that I admire about the online world, is that you get to make it what you want to make it and what you want to get out of it. I don't want a perfect world because I'm not perfect. And so I can't admire your perfection. Only God is perfect, and I love him and I admire him for that. And more than anything, the thing that I'm most grateful for is that he's perfect. Therefore, I don't have to be. He's not asking that of me. So I get to choose how I live. I get to choose my stake on the ground. Like, how do I show up in this world? And I don't want to show up in a world where I can't be imperfect. My brain tells me something different, and that's what I'm sharing. He and I, it's a he. It can't be a she. I mean, sometimes it's a she because she's dramatic too. But like the criticism, I'm gonna call it a he. So he and I don't always agree, and I'm learning to tame him. And part of it is me showing up here, right? But I think that my hope for this podcast, more than anything, and I think I've said it before, but I want to reiterate this, is that you find the permission slip you've been looking for, right? That permission that says you get to be yourself, you get to be imperfect, you get to show up, you get to exist as you are. This is it. This is for you. It's not just going to be me talking and sharing reflections. There's going to be a lot of different interviews and people that I'm going to bring. Some episodes, by the way, it should be important that it is a bilingual podcast. So some episodes are going to be in Spanish. You're going to get to meet a lot of interesting, beautiful people that I've met along the way, who have a beautiful story, who have something to share, who I personally have fell in love with. And therefore you should too. Like, that's just bottom line. I think that that is only fair. But I think there's something special about following your dreams in this season. And I think we live in the perfect time to do so, because so many people are doing it. And the question is, why not you? Why not me? Why not us? Like, what's so different about us? We get to make this choice for ourselves. I loved because my bosses this week were telling me about, I was telling them how like May 27th is the day or is the day, is do or die. It either happens or it happens. And they were like, we're living the dream. We can't limit you to live yours. And I think that's why, by the way, I love working with them so much. I think they know, but if they don't, well, now you know. If they watch this episode, I feel like I have been so blessed to be surrounded by people who are living their dreams in one way or another, or at least a version of it right now. And they continue to work towards other dreams that they have, and they continue to fight for them, and they continue to move forward, and they continue to just say yes to themselves. And I think that for so many years, I have said yes to everybody else. And that's something that I'm working on. It's so easy for me to commit to other people and to promise something and deliver to them. But then when I promise myself something, it is so easy for me to be like, okay, that's it. Like I have something to do or I'm busy. Like for my own promises or the promises I made to myself, it's usually an excuse as to why not do it. There's overthinking, there's fear, making up excuses, there's not time, I don't know, then there's a name. Like there's all these other things like that make it quote unquote impossible for me to follow through. But I'll never be perfect. And I think there's freedom in that. Also, very important, before I forget, the whole point why I decided to launch today, and that I think is important to know, is that today marks the 8-month countdown to my 40th birthday. I know I look young. I don't look like I'm 39, but I am. And I wanted to make something really special for today to commemorate that and hold me accountable. I have this idea of the road to 40. And so these 8 months are going to carry something that takes me closer to celebrating my birthday in a special way, but also celebrating what life has been until now, right? I feel like birthdays are always about celebrating about what's coming, but there is so much that has already happened in life. It was 40 years, is a lot. A lot has happened, and I've lived like 3 lives in these 40 years, but I wanted to start this process by keeping a promise to myself. So I started with keeping the promise of the podcast. Yes, this is happening. Yes, we're recording. Yes, we're launching. Yes, we're going to be out in the world, and we're going to keep this promise, and we're going to keep going with this podcast. So that's one. But I also wanted this to start commemorating what the next 8 months will be. And so the reason why I bring it up is because it's about that. It's about, okay, what have I wanted to do that I've said no to myself? What have I dreamt of that I've just put to the side? What has little Meli? I think something that also comes to mind is I've been hearing online this idea of like there's only 2 people that you got to make proud in your life, your 8-year-old self version of yourself and the 80-year-old version of yourself. And interestingly enough, my friend is launching an album called Childhood Dreams, basically in Spanish, Infancia. And one of the reels that he released to talk about the album was making that little Meli or that little them proud. And if I'm honest, I'm not too in tune with that little girl. Like, I'm not too in tune with her dreams. She was, guys, the cutest performer that she could ever be. She was a model. She was an actress. She was a whole lip singer because she didn't have a voice. We were given a communicating voice, not a singing voice. Not that that's not there. I'm not gonna lie. Just saying. Anything can happen. Listen, a 92-year-old woman won, what is it? I think it was Best New Artist at 92 for Latin Grammys. I'm not sure, I'll come back to that. But she won a Grammy at 92. And she passed away at 95. So she celebrated for 3 years or 92 where she didn't have it. I'm just saying, like, anything can happen and it's never too late. I think it's also reconnecting with her through this podcast and giving her a voice and giving her life. Little Meli, she's cute. If you go on my Instagram, she's really cute. But she was very colorful, so this kind of makes sense. I will post a picture this week, I promise. I'll post it again because it's somewhere in my feed about me. Like, it's a picture of me performing. I'm actually going to give you the carousel of like modeling, lip singing. They're in my feed, but I'm just going to do it again just so you have it top of mind. She was a hoot, and she was so cute, and she's such a performer. But if I'm honest, life really drifted me away from her. And most of us have drifted from our little selves, our inner child. But I think seeing that content and seeing my friend do this album and him releasing it should be released by the time I post this, but I don't know. I'm not asking so many questions, but I think you can look at the inner child stuff and think, whatever, there's another inner child, and reparent yourself and kind of like, disregard it. But there is something to the fact that we were created to dream and with dreams, and we were created with talent, and we were created with gifts, and we were so like, the creation of each human being is so full of life, and life itself will try to tear that apart and to make you, I think, a shell of ourselves, right? And so a lot of the work that we do, we aren't trying to become a new thing, a new creation, except for spiritually, I get it. But I think a lot of our healing, a lot of our transformation, a lot of our maturing is really going back to that original creation, that original design. And so there's a battle and there's a fight to fight, which is to go back to that, to not let the voices of the outside world dictate who we are, but to really listen and to really, I don't know that the word is hunt or dig, but I think it's to look within, to really inspect and to find those things that really, in a way, brought us to life. And for me, communication is such a big part of it. So my hope is also that she kind of comes to life here. And there's many other ways to do it, of course. But this is one way to give her a voice, to give little Meli a voice, and to allow her to dream again and to exist and to share what her dream is. So I hope that as I do this and as you walk with me, that you find that for yourself, because I am sure that there's plenty beautiful inside, and there's plenty that the world needs that you have and you were uniquely created with. And it's your dream for a reason, and it's your desire for a reason, and it's your gift for a reason. And I think it's important, if not crucial, to a fulfilling life, to find those things, to dig for them and to validate them for yourself, and to really just live your dream. And dreams look different for different people, but they're all worth it. Which is why the whole, I want to say, slogan motto of this podcast is, you can never be too much, but you'll never be enough until you're very much yourself. Because the unique design that you have is exactly what God's dream was for this moment in your life and this moment on earth, right? You are what earth needed for it to be a little bit better and much, much brighter. So welcome. This is episode 1. I wanted to give you an introduction into the podcast and where we've been, where we are, and hopefully where we're going. I do have already the idea for episode 2, but I think you just have to tune in to find out. We're going to talk about me. So welcome. I like talking about myself, but I hope that you enjoyed this first episode. I hope that you subscribe and you stay up to date with all the things happening. My Instagram handle is Hola, it's Meli. So if you know a little bit of Spanish, you would know that. And we should connect there until the next episode. But until then, know that you are loved, and I know that you are absolutely enough. Until next time.